Welcome, everyone. My guest today is the lead people scientist at a company called CultureAmp. And let me tell you, this is a company that you want to know about. What they do is they support organizations in building effective people and culture strategies, along with building the culture first community. So, my guest today, Craig Forman, this is his job. He is helping make positive culture change in organizations, which, if you've been with me for a while, you know this is one of my biggest pet peeves in organizations, large and small, is making sure that they have their culture on point. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but we're also really going to focus on Craig's career path to get to CultureAmp and to becoming a people scientist, because let me tell you, he has a varied career path, which I love because that's how my career path was. And just to give you a little bit of an idea, he is actually a veteran of the US Air Force. He spent some time in higher education, which, as you know, that's part of my history too. So we definitely have something in common with that. He spent some time in ed tech companies before coming into CultureAmp. He also has a master's degree in industrial and organizational psychology, which again lends itself for the work that he does. Craig, thank you so much for being a guest today.
Absolutely. I'm so glad to be here, Julia. I've enjoyed getting to know you, and I'm with you. I'm really happy that I get to speak, a little bit about my work, but I don't often get to talk about my journey. And I think it's important because it wasn't, like you just said, it wasn't a straight path. And I think it's important. I think there's a lot, at least for me, I thought it was supposed to be so straight and narrow. And looking back, I realize now, but being able to share that and to tell others, how the dots do connect a little bit, but also that the journey is not straight and narrow, and to keep on the journey. And there's some, like, I think, key things in there to help. So thanks for having me. I'm really excited about this opportunity and excited for the conversation.
Yes, me too. So let's start off with what you're doing right now at CultureAmp, because I know before I got connected with you, I didn't really know that an organization like this existed. Wish I had known a while back, because I definitely would have recommended it in a couple of different situations. But can you tell me a little bit about what you do and what your main responsibilities are with CultureAmp?
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of like what you hit on. I mean, CultureAmp at its core is we are a tech solution, a SaaS-based tech solution to support organizations, to embed those tools in the organization to help them listen, to run effective surveys, to then take that information and collect, understand, and then take action on that information in a human way, and then also on performance. So we have a lot of tools to support performance management cycle, reducing bias, trying to make that a more human process, and also separating out performance management from individual development. So we have tools around personal development as well, as a way to, support our organizations to create, the kind of organization that we want to see in the world. Our what is our technology, but what I've always been attracted to is kind of our why, which is this deeper belief of, how we can improve the workplace, how we can bring humanity back to the workplace. And that really informs our tools. And that's been really important for me, that we've walked that walk. That's what's kept me connected to it more than just a software platform. It's about a real shift or change. My role, I joined as a people scientist. The first couple of years, I really spent my time working with our clients, helping them think about how they're approaching these listening strategies, and taking that information to make strong database decisions to support healthy culture, right? And how are you making the right decisions, and using data and information to support that? Amazing. I love that work. But what you just spoke about, some of this, you've been passionate about it. And I think probably a lot of your listeners, there's so many people out there really passionate about organizational culture in general. I was one of those people. It's why I chose to get my degree in organizational psychology. And because I landed at a place like CultureAmp, and they were supportive in me kind of pursuing some of my, just my passion in general, and doing the day-to-day work, but also really leaning in and looking for new opportunities. I found myself having the opportunity to speak or be at conferences. I started doing interviews. I started posting those, and really just leaning into this idea of building my own, like being out there in the world, both with CultureAmp and on my own, as somebody that's really passionate about the space, wants to amplify those voices. And that's pulled me. Before, I was really in a always client-facing role. I came up in client success. But then I transitioned over the last couple of years into marketing. It really started when we started doing these large events. We decided we're going to run these Culture First global conferences. I raised my hand really just to volunteer. I wanted to be part. And then next year I was on the global events team, building these events, really leaning into facilitation and how to, build solid events that were human focused, and they were winning. It was amazing. And then a little over a year ago, we decided we want to go bigger with our community, which is something we've always had, is a community of people that believe in this and are supportive of it. But we want to be more intentional and really build a new iteration that, people are saying to us, it's great when CultureAmp comes and hosts these conversations. When are you coming back? And we might not be back for a year. So what we decided to do was to build a community and start to empower people around the world that wanted to host and support this movement, this cause, have these conversations and help better the workplace. So I jumped in to help build that. We just had to start figuring it out. And last year we added about 45 chapters globally. We're running 12 to 16 events every month organically. And it's amazing. And it's been a really special thing to be involved in, and continuation of my purpose, which I think we'll talk about in this conversation. And just letting my journey and kind of my professional journey start to unfold and take me where it's taking me at this point.
Wow, that's amazing. I had no idea. I don't like to do a ton of prep before interviews, so I didn't know a lot about what CultureAmp was doing, but wow, what a great resource for my listeners, anybody that stumbles upon this interview. That's amazing. Okay, one thing I want to point out too that you're talking about, because I talk about this a lot with clients. I end up getting a lot of clients who want to do thought leadership, and they're trying to figure out, how do I do that? And I feel like what you're doing in your career right now is exactly that. You started off with the company doing really well, and your position morphed. And it sounds like you had some say in what that looked like based on your own passions. And it's now becoming part of the fabric of who you are out in the world, and your story and your image, with or without culture amp. And I think that is really the definition of becoming a thought leader, and creating that voice for yourself, because now you're going to get pulled to do other things as you, not just as a representative of culture amp.
It's been an interesting journey. I mean, I will say to anybody that's on that path as an individual, particularly right now, I think that's shifting and changing. I think that what I'm doing 2 or 3 years ago felt probably strange to the organization a little bit, although it was well aligned and we've moved forward together. But my deeper sense is that more and more people are gonna, we're gonna be hiring people that have followings, that are influencers, and you don't have to have 1 million followers. I mean, in my world around culture, if you have 10 or 15,000 followers, I mean, it's concentrated on your topic. That's pretty powerful. So let's say I built it here at CultureAmp, but I moved to another job. They're going to have to hire me knowing that. I think we're going to see more of that, these kind of thought leaders and influencers in very niche areas. So yeah, I mean, but I would say that it was a merge of two things. For me, it was number one, I think, to do that, you talk about imposter syndrome or all the things that come up, like you have to do your own personal work to really find your voice, to be, solid enough and ground enough to go into the world and being able to do that. So I think just showing up to CultureAmp saying I was interested in that was part of the journey. And then they said, well, we can support you in that. As far as an organization goes, I would just say, keep thinking about it. I would push you to rethink, traditional marketing. I think there's some benefit there, but I can see how easy there's a difference. There's a difference in marketing a product versus letting, people in the world have their own voice and speak and represent you, and there's a little bit of letting go and a trust thing. But I think if you're willing to create content and experiment with that and let people that are part of your community, or you feel like they're part of that community, even internally, can you support them to build that voice online, to start to share their thoughts and see how that kind of represents your organization at a higher level? And not just, are you talking about our new product, but are you representing what we're about and our values?
Right. So great. Oh my gosh, there's so much value in that for our
Mhm.
listeners. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, let's get into your story. Let's talk about your path to Culture Amp. Can you give me an idea of maybe 2 or 3 poignant transitions that you had in your career that you felt led you to this
Yeah,
place?
absolutely. I love telling the whole story, but this was a great thing to think about, to pull out these three key moments in my career. The first was when I was young. It was my work at camp as a camp counselor. And it's amazing how these years later, I still look back to that. And I think for me, it was the first time, look, I came up, I was having to work in restaurants, and, I had to kind of earn my own way, so a little bit. And so I just had these kind of jobs. And then I worked at a summer camp one summer, which turned into a few consecutive summers. And the juxtaposition just always blew me away. of how much deeper and richer that experience was. And I always sat with, why can't we have more of this in other jobs? The camaraderie, the community, the sense of purpose, and like what we're doing with the kids, the satisfaction when it was over, and you felt like you impacted people's lives. So that really stuck with me. I think those were the first seeds in my own career of at least what was possible. I didn't know where my career was going, believe me, at the time, but I still hold on to that. I think is really even to this day, like camp is a great, I think, metaphor for what we want to build in our workplaces. The second you spoke about was the military. I think the military was really, I'm really happy that I had that opportunity. Particularly now that I'm working in culture, because I think when people hear the word culture, they think of pool tables and kegerators or whatever, all the soft, stuff that's associated, but that's not what culture is. I mean, culture is really fundamentally about the way we do things around here. And in our organizations, it's about kind of how do we do things to deliver on that brand, to that promise to our customers. Without it, the organization goes away. So it's not the same as your family or other things that will remain. And the reason I say that is I think the military to me was a great example of a culture that's designed to do something that may not be the normal thing that we're used to, but the 82nd Airborne Division can have 70,000 people anywhere in the world in under 24 hours. I mean, think about what's the culture needed to do that. I mean, it is command and control. There's not a lot of room for people to make decisions. It's about training and preparation. I think it helps me reflect. I mean, I spent a lot of time with your typical organizations today that are probably thinking about some of the same sorts of things that are important to speed and adaptability and creativity, but that's not culture. That's the culture. We need to do that. And every unique organization has different cultures. So I think the military really taught me a lot about an alternative culture and how culture works. And then finally, I think it was the third piece. So there's the military. After that, I used that to go back to school. I got my undergraduate degree in business. I wrapped that up. I decided to come back to California. The military brought me out here. And then eventually, got situated and got my grad degree in organizational psychology. The thing I'll call out there is that I intentionally chose it. It wasn't the most popular, but it really called me. So I'd say to anybody thinking about your grad degree, be focused. That's a really perfect time to focus in on something you're passionate about. But coming out of the grad degree and getting clear on my purpose, which was its own journey to help the world work better by improving the places we work, and being able to own that, say that in the world, things shifted. I will just say that the career people see me in today was not always my career. And the turning point, I had gotten the education, I'd done looking back, got the tools I needed. But then when I was finally really clear on my purpose and able to say that succinctly, didn't change overnight, but it was pretty amazing how much my career has taken a shift. So I think leaning into my purpose, and some I'd say to anybody that's, depending on where they are in their journey, that's what you should be striving for.
I really appreciate you sharing those points, because I'll be honest, based on our previous conversation, that is not what I thought you were going to say. So no, I love it. I love it, because when you reach back into your younger self, a lot of times those experiences impact us so much more than we recognize. And I know I'm in a place where I'm digging into my childhood a lot and what happened back then and what does that mean and how does that inform who I am right now and all of it. We all go through that. And so I think it's great that one of your poignant transitions was that far back, because I think that lets other people know, oh, it's okay for me to take this thing that happened when I was younger and have it inform who I am now. I think sometimes there's this, we have to separate from our childhood. We have to completely leave it in the past. And sometimes we do. And sometimes there are parts of ourselves that we do need to leave in the past, but there are other things that become the seed in the back of our head that,
Yeah.
helps us move forward. So I really appreciate that, and sharing about your military experience. I know I've had clients who absolutely refuse to talk about their military experience, will not put it on any materials. They don't want anybody to know for a variety of reasons, but I really appreciate the positive outlook that you have of your experience, because I think somebody who might be listening to this, who, might be wrestling with their experience, being able to hear it framed in a positive way, which you can absolutely do, because the skills that you get in the military, I don't care what you did in the military, they are insane. They're so good and they can translate so well as long as you likely have somebody to help you translate them.
Yeah, I'm really proud of it. I grew a lot. I really did. There was some growth that I needed to go through, and the military was a good environment for that. And I'm really grateful. And but I do have to ask, where did you think I was going?
A lot of my interviews, people talk about specific jobs as the
Mm,
transitions. And you didn't take that route as much. You talked more, the what was happening in the younger years, the military, which I guess that could be considered a job, and then the education piece. Most people talk about
nah.
their work transitions. And so I love that. I love that you took that route because
Mm.
I think it adds a little bit of a different twist than what I've heard from other people who've been on
Cool. Yeah, I mean,
podcasts. So
I think it's anybody just like look like the one thing I've realized, number one, is like when if you can get to the place where you can get clear on your purpose, once you do that, you can look back and you can see everything was there. Like the irony is you've kind of known all along, but the journey is
mhm.
getting back to it, and I think the camp thing, I didn't know at the time. It was years, but I'm all these years later, I still think about it. It still inspired me. So I know that it meant something to me when I think back, particularly to my culture journey and what's inspired me along the way and informed me that there could be a better way. And at least resonated for me and helped me on my path to what I need to be doing in the world.
Nice. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would love to know in the journey that you've been on, what are some pieces of advice that you would give to people who are trying to advance their career? And maybe because you had such a varied journey, are there things that you would have done different in that path?
Yeah, this is a great one. I think like I've started to hit on it. And I think if I had to say high level, I think if everything goes well in your journey, the first part is figuring out what I've been talking about, your purpose, but not beating yourself up if you don't know it. It's okay. I think the first part of the journey is figuring that out, which means you need the bad job, which may not have been bad. Maybe it was bad for you because you were misplaced. And can you let that inform you and not carry a ton of resentment and say, oh, I see what I learned there. I don't belong in that type of environment. I don't like repetitive work. I struggle in these, and see and believe that if you're working towards figuring out my judgment is for a lot of people happens in your 30s. Like, what are you truly here on this planet to do? And I think part of that is exploring and trying it out. So don't beat yourself up if you're early, but let that be your work, even if you're having jobs you don't really like. And and I always talk, can you lily pad? Can you say, I don't know exactly where I'm going, but I know I want this particular skill or that. And can I just get a job where maybe it's in a different industry, but I'm doing that thing? And I look back, I'm like, oh, those were the lily pads that led me there. So I say, if you're not clear, I mean, when you heard me say it, right, to help the world work better by improving the places we work. Boom. Like it's quick. I can say it. I've gotten comfortable saying it in front of people, and it's amazing what happens when you can articulate what you're doing. I mean it. Like we can talk more later on in my story. There are scary moments when you do that, but when you can do it, it's pretty powerful and what can come your way because you can articulate that. So if you're not there, let that be your work while you're figuring it out, and don't beat yourself up if you don't have the perfect job, because of course you don't yet. You haven't gotten clear on what you're here to do. I'd say once you think you can really, you're clear, and that doesn't mean it can't change down the road, but clear enough that you're like, this is what I'm really willing to stake my claim on right now. This is what I want to be doing in the world.
Mhm.
Then I'd say from that place, start to develop a plan. Are you missing some skills? Are the things you need? Are there certain types of jobs or organizations? Maybe it's the right organization and the wrong role, but if you get in, you believe you can, make your move. So and patience. I know this world is full of telling us now, seeing everybody getting theirs, but really, if you talk to people that have done great stuff, it's the same. It's hard work. It's focus. It's hard work. It's patience, and it's showing up who you are the way you want to show up every day, regardless of the environment around you. So you have a bad job, you're still showing up the way you would in other jobs. You're being open, transparent, whatever it is you value. And you know what? Maybe that job will shift, and the world will start to kind of think. I judge the world will start to evolve around you a bit as well.
Yes. Oh man. Okay. I hope everybody was hearing, like go back, rewind, re-listen to everything that Craig just said. Mic drop. Like, do we even have to continue this interview? That was amazing. Yes.
I'm happy we landed with you.
Oh my gosh, so I'm a career strategist. So
Mhm.
one of the main differences there is I am not focused on your resume and whether or not you can interview for a job. I am focused on the bigger picture. I'm focused on career transformation. I'm focused on exactly what you're talking about. So this is really where I
That's the wonder,
get
right? And like,
excited.
look, and you asked me what I would do differently. I mean, it's just I just wish somebody was there to tell me that earlier. Like I could have probably shaved some years off of the journey. I mean, I still need to go through it. And I want to tell everybody, like, embrace your like I often said, embrace the suck. Like, if you're in it, like, can you be at peace with it and believe that it's teaching you something? And I think the more you resist it, the longer you'll stay in it, the longer you'll be unhappy. Like, use the, I think the career journey for most people does have some moments of challenge. And can you be with it and say, what am I supposed to learn here? Am I supposed to learn this isn't for me? Am I supposed to learn about some skills I need to be building? Um, but I only say that to offset. Like, I don't want to seem like I'm saying I wish we would have shortened it all and sped up, but I do think I probably, with some good mentorship and advice, if someone shared that earlier, could have helped me along in the journey and probably taken a little bit of the length of the challenge out.
Yeah, and that's the thing, I used to work with college students a lot, and I would get the seniors who were like, "Okay, I'm going to graduate and I need this perfect job because this is what I've been wanting to do for 4 years and I'm headed here." And I'm like, "Hey, that's great, but what happens once you get that perfect job, quote unquote, then what?" "Well, but that's it.
Mhm.
That's the job. That's where I want to go." And I'm like, "Okay."
It's the perfect job and your manager is awful, and then what? Is it all
Right.
over? Is it ruined because you're not your job, right? And I think that's the thing, you get fixated on that. Believe me, like, everybody, I just think the universe, like, everybody's gotta pay their dues at some level, shape, or form. So you get the perfect job and then it doesn't work out because you have a bad manager, then does it ruin your whole identity? Does it crush you? And does it take you off? If you're moving from purpose, it doesn't matter. You'll just recraft that. Or COVID hit. Okay, well, this is what I'm doing. How do I do it post-COVID? And I've seen some people that I think had a career going in this hit and they couldn't adapt very well. And I honestly believe they got so fixated on their role that because they didn't have a tight grip on their purpose, they couldn't shift. They were moving from a place of my job's been changed or taken away versus, okay, here's what I'm doing in the world. Everything's changed. How do I reshuffle the landscape to continue to bring this into the world? So that's again why it's so important to do that upfront work.
Well, and I think COVID, as awful as it has been some of the best learning for a lot of people and organizations around what's possible, what are we doing, how prepared are we, what do I really care about? That's what I've been hearing from my clients. What do I care about? Do I really want to be home with my kids while I'm working? And some people are like, "Heck no, this is hard." And that's okay. You don't have to want to be home with your kids while they're trying to do online school and you're trying to work online and
For everybody.
juggle everything. That's okay. But at the same time, you're learning something about yourself. So if you got to a place in your career where you're like, "I wish that I could be at home. I wish that I had more time." Having more time and wanting to work from home are two different things. And I think we're seeing people, especially in their 30s and 40s with kids, really realize what that actually means and what that looks like.
Also in my other, talking about my work, like, we're very clear, and our CEO has spoken a lot about this, and I believe it. Working from home and working from home during a crisis are two different things. So, like, I think we're conflating the two. I think right now we are working our way through a pretty intense pandemic situation. That's different than I want to work from home. So I think we just need to hold on to, let's get through this and then decide. But to your point, usually the toughest things, like, yes, hard, and what can I learn? What can I gain? And oftentimes it's the challenging times that we grow from. So I'm with you. I hope that this is an opportunity. And I think this is providing a massive shift in the landscape. So I think it's going to open up a lot of opportunities for people that say, rethink things. Where can you work from? What kind of job can you have? Maybe you're not as physically limited as before. Maybe you have a disability and there's new opportunities. So I'm just really excited about some of the things. I think there's gonna be a shift. I don't think it's gonna look just like this, but I don't think we can ever just rewind and act like this didn't happen.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm so glad you mentioned people with disabilities. Honestly, that is one of the things that I am most excited for is the opportunity that people will have who have not been able to go into a traditional office
Yeah.
or who need accommodations that organizations have not been willing to provide. I think this is, hopefully, fingers crossed, this really opens up so many opportunities for them. I think it's going to be great.
I do as well.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about management tips. And I feel like you could, because of the work that you do, you could take this from a couple different angles, but I would love to know, what are your management tips, either as a manager, as somebody who has been managed, or out of the work that you do? What do you recommend?
Yeah. Another great one. You're right. This is, gosh, I mean, it's this conversation, but it's also a lot of my work. So, like I have three things I would share with managers. One is, I think it's time to reframe, our ideas around motivation and strategies. And I reference, if anybody wants to dig deeper into what I'm about to say, Prime to Perform, a book by Neil Doshi and Lindsay McGregor. They're brilliant. They're both ex-McKinsey consultants. I think he was the youngest partner ever. And so it's very data backed around motivation. And what they say is, our organizations for the longest time have really over-indexed on, they have these 6 core motivators, and they've over-indexed on economic, emotional, and inertia, those as motivators, right? Like, do this to get the raise and do this for promotion status and those sorts of things. However, all of the research tells us that when we use those, we get very short-term results and we diminish intrinsic motivation, right? So if you love doing something and I start paying you to do it, research shows us that your internal motivation will start to drop, which is, we do it so often. So, right, we're sapping kind of the true drive of our employees. So to a manager, I'd say the other 3 that they speak about is play, purpose, and potential, right? And honing more in on those motivators. And again, what I love about this is research backed. So when I say play, they're talking about that state of flow. They're talking about, I think there was a quote somewhere like, imagine a world where everybody, no matter what level, is working on a really interesting problem at work, right? Like getting that creativity. So I would definitely recommend, I don't think we're going to go too deep into it now, but I love their work. They have a whole thing called Total Motivation, which is an index. And what I'll say, which I think is really cool about that, is that when they do the measurement, play is weighted doubly as high as purpose, which is doubly as high as potential. And I just think that's so interesting. And I think we need to bring this idea of play back and let go or question our assumptions of what that means and what it conjures up. And is that necessarily truth? Why are we stripping that out of our work experience? The second is something called, I love this, Michael Ventura, who wrote a book called Applied Empathy, but he's also the CEO of like a 100-person design firm in New York City called Sub Rosa. So really creative guy. Met him at South by Southwest, got to know him. I've had the opportunity to interview him, but he wrote a book called Applied Empathy. And he really breaks down empathy in some unique ways, but he talks about something called cognitive empathy. And the way he defines that is do unto others as they would have you do unto them, right? So it's this idea, and he said it's different from effective empathy. He has these 3 types of empathy. Effective empathy is the golden rule: do unto others as you want to be done unto you. And I think that's really a great one for managers, and that gets at this emotional intelligence and the ability to pull yourself out and really hear the people you're supporting, understand them, and do unto them as they would have you do unto them. And that get to that level of empathy. He says there's somatic empathy. Like if you slam your hand in a door, I'm going to feel it. That's a type of empathy, but that's not what we're building in our organizations. And same with this with the effective empathy. That's really not what we're going for. For a manager, it's the idea of this cognitive empathy. Can you get yourself in the shoes of the people you're supporting and build plans that support them, not what you think they want? So that's the second one. And then the third one I came up with was, are you getting support? You need to be a manager. Like, I think we need to really develop this in our organizations. I'm still blown away by how little, like, I think management should be its own track in college. You should hire people to simply be managers. That what we're doing now just doesn't seem to fit very well. So number one, are you getting the support you need to be a good manager? And if not, what are you doing about it? Like, you got to take, you have to own that. Go to your organization, say, I need some support here. I need the story that you're just supposed to know, and you're supposed to have it all. And now we have managers that are impacting people's lives in negative ways. Oftentimes they don't know better because they haven't been developed, and just probably like you have as well. So those are the 3, right? Reframe your motivation to play, purpose, potential. Leverage cognitive empathy, understand others and do unto them as they would have you do unto them. And also really do an assessment on the support you're getting as a manager. And if you're not getting what you need, how can you be 100% responsible to take action to do what you need to develop yourself?
Yes. Oh man. Okay. So my big thing is taking action. Craig, you're just affirming everything that I put out into the world. I love
have
it.
a career, don't I?
It's so so great. So all those resources I will link into the blog post. So anybody that's trying to write it down or remember, don't worry about it. I'll put it in there and we'll have that for you so you can find those books, which
Let those
I am
amazing people
also
know, tag them so they know that this happened, and that, I'd love for them to know. Like,
I'm going to, and I'm gonna put those books on my list as well, because those are not ones that I was aware of. So very excited about that. But oh my gosh. Okay. Taking responsibility for your own learning. Can we
I mean,
please?
I try to move this idea of everybody's 100% responsible, right? We're all 100%. And so it's really kind of getting at this blame game. And, in any scenario in your life, not, what can you control, what you can't control, but are you taking responsibility for what you can control, and what are you doing, to get what you need? If you go into a meeting and it's a bad meeting, and week after week it's a bad meeting, and you're complaining about it, I get it. Are you saying anything? Are you doing anything to adjust that? Or are you just using that as a crutch to say, this is why I hate it here?
Yes, yes. I had a client who called me and was that exact scenario.
Yeah.
My manager is just not listening to me, and I'm stressed out, and this and that. I mean, the laundry list of things, and he's not paying attention in our one-on-ones. And I send him agendas and this and that. And I'm like, yeah, but have you told him how his behavior is making you feel?
Mhm.
And the result of that, like, have you articulated it clearly? No.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start there. Like,
And
let's
what a great lesson, right?
articulate.
Like, you're not just doing the work in that situation. I mean, I would also say, like, where else in your life is that showing up? So if you're doing that work around that one situation, I mean, supporting people to like find their voice, and just, and we all, again, most of us weren't taught that growing up. So we need support. I think we need safe spaces I call it the laboratory, to play with these things, especially as you're getting into emotion. It's psychological safety, and bring these things to work. And it's wonderful. But like, if I'm somebody's bottled up anger my whole life, is work the place I'm supposed to go start taking it out? Or do I need a place to work with it a little bit, get it, mitigate, like understand it, so it's safe when I bring it to work and say, I'm really upset about this, and you're not, flying off the handle because so we need safe spaces. I think, like, laboratory space to play with some of these things and maybe have that conversation, because it's scary for people, but how are we supporting each other and creating space for one another to do that and have a little bit of grace for each other?
Right. Oh, yes, absolutely. And I've been on the side of that where I've had managers where I have voiced how I felt or what I needed, and they were not equipped to handle it, or or manage me.
But I
And
would say,
then
but you showed up. Like, we can't, maybe that's your journey to move past that job to the right manager. And how many people sit there, keep banging their head against the wall? You showed up the way you need to show up. We can't change how others, where they are on their journey. And I think I want people to just every day say, I showed up as empowered as I could, and I can let go of the outcome of the world. I know I'm really in alignment and integrity with my own values and how I want to show up, and I'm leaning into that, and I can be okay with let the chips fall where they may.
yeah, yeah. And I learned empathy out of that situation. As an INTJ, empathy's kind of, sometimes. And that was my big learning moment, was empathy, and being able to see what was going on with that manager, the lack of training, and a lot of other
We
impacts.
only share the end.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's the only one.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Okay. Dare I ask, what are your thoughts on 360 reviews in organizations?
Oh, I mean, I think it's, maybe someone jump. I like it. I don't like it. I think it's great. I think the challenge is who's facilitating it. How's it being managed? How's it being run? I mean, that's really where the scary part is, to run a healthy assessment that can, designed in the right way, that really helps uncover how other people, I mean, like it or not, it doesn't really matter just what you think of yourself. I mean, the reality is these are relationships. So to be able to understand how others are perceiving your actions and be able to take that, internalize it in a way that allows you to, be supported and let your defenses down and feel safe so you can incorporate that. That's tricky. And I think you can have a great assessment, but I've done a lot of work around this, that you can have the same sort of assessment and two different people delivering it. One can go completely off the rails. So it goes back to what we talked about before, like really skilled people delivering that feedback, people that understand how that works, how sensitive this is. I really like. I mean, on CultureAmp, we do, and we've been working a lot on performance. So we do 360s and 180s, but we're moving a lot more towards these kind of performance and this ongoing conversation with leaders and managers and gathering feedback from your peers. And there are ways to ask questions. There are ways to design these that are really trying to, growth mindset and encouragement, and where are you doing well? What's an area that you think you could do, build on, and setting it up in a way and creating a culture that we're giving feedback to support one another. So I guess the short is, all these things are great, but if they're just a technology, a tool. It's really how much are we doing to support the delivery and, the human piece behind running these, giving these feedback, supporting people through the journey.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that
Where do you
because,
stand?
well, I have a love-hate relationship for that reason. I
Yeah.
think that they're needed, but I've been in situations where we've done 360s and I had a colleague tell me, well, I scored everything on the middle because I don't want to, I don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but if you don't score it how you truly feel, then that person's never going to get any of that feedback and grow. But that was also a toxic environment. So there was, so it all plays into it. And I think exactly what you're talking about, that delivery piece, if people are not trained to talk about performance, to talk about your skill set and what, who you are, what you can do, how you can grow, it's not going to mean much. I would go into not 360 reviews, but I would go into performance reviews. And because of who I am and my personality type,
Yeah.
I knew exactly where I excelled. I knew what needed work. Like I had all of that just because of who I
Because of who
am,
you are. Yeah. But
you
I will
know?
go meta. I'll go meta here. And this is really cool. And something I've learned is we've built tools around performance management that I didn't think about before. Um, in organizations, we've merged performance and development. And if you really strip it back, those are two separate conversations that don't belong together. I mean, how do I really sit with you and talk about, evaluate your performance, how you've done against your expected outcomes, your raise, your promotion, and have a genuine, honest, safe conversation about your development? Like, are you going to tell me that you really don't like this job, when your promotion and raise is on it and you're thinking about alternatives? So our tools, we've tried to do is separate those two out to have a distinct performance management process that is separate from our development process and conversation. Because there are a lot of problems that arise. So I think what you just said, I think historically we've been merging those together, and it's antithetical to what we're saying we want to achieve.
Mm, yeah. And also, a good performance does not mean that you should just get more work piled on you.
Right. I've struggled with that. I mean, I'm ADHD. I'll sit down sometimes in 4 hours and crank out 2 days worth of work that's been brewing in my mind forever. And then kind of go into like, I need to walk. I go into a slump to process again. I used to beat myself up about that. And then, I mean, one part of my journey was like, no, that's how I work. And number two, yeah, I think the traditional organization might say, well, get more. And it's not, I wish work differently. So I think we need to be moving more towards outcomes, goals, objectives, we do it in different ways. So yeah, I'm really happy you asked about that. It's so interesting. This, it definitely gets into the meat of our world with CultureAmp.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I hope people contact you
Oh,
after
please.
this
I do
because
too. Number one, to have this conversation. Look, there are other tools. Like, I think we're a really special company. And I think if you're thinking about this, we want to be in the lineup. Please evaluate, see what we're doing. Again, culturefirst.com, you can learn more. And then, no, I'm sorry, cultureamp.com. I wanted to tell you. So cultureamp.com is everything, our product. Culturefirst.com is the site that we're building around our community and just the kind of the bigger, what we're trying to build in the world. So those two are two places. And then also, with me, please connect with me on LinkedIn. That's my place. And we can have a conversation. I can see what makes sense.
yes, love that. Okay, let's do a little bit more resourcing. You've already given us so many resources and books that I'm going to put into the blog post, but tell me a book that changed your perspective on your career or life. And it
Hmm.
can be multiple because I know you have a lot of resources.
No, I have three. One, the first two are if you're interested in particular topics, and the third is a must, right? So the first one I've mentioned, which is really about if you're interested in motivation as a leader, Prime to Perform. It's one of those books I read, but over the years, I just keep going back and thinking about it. I've gotten, it's just, yeah, Prime to Perform, Lindsay McGregor, Neil Doshi. The second was somebody that started to really influence me, I spent a year at LinkedIn and I was really impressed with that culture and what they were doing there. And there was a gentleman named Fred Kaufman, who was kind of the, with Jeff Weiner, kind of the cultural guru guy at the top that was helping rethink about their coaching and their, and how they were doing that. And he wrote a couple of books, but his last book was called The Meaning Revolution by Fred Kaufman. And it's really about leadership. And I just read it, and just every time I remember it, it just inspires me. It talks a lot about what we're talking about, the human piece, but from a very practical perspective, like running a business. But how do we get more human? How do we put in ourselves in other people's shoes, and coaching and that sort of thing, which I really like. So that's the leadership one. And then the book that I think was such a big, really, if I have to say, there was a book that changed my life, that was, big one, that I think gets underneath all of it, was Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. Right. To this day, I still listen to her stuff, but that book, this idea of vulnerability and flipping it, from what it might feel like to you, but to what the world sees, and realizing the world sees vulnerability as courageous and brave, and that to really do change in the world, strength is vulnerability. And I read that book. It inspired me. I played with that concept in safe spaces. I realized that it really was doing what she said. Like, the more vulnerable I was, the more people were inspired, attracted, were interested. And I've made a career of really leaning into that. And I think it's really the thing under it all, especially for leaders and managers, is this idea of vulnerability and breaking this old masculine myth of, the leader's supposed to know it all, tough, stand alone. That doesn't work. So that's the book, Daring Greatly. If you haven't read that book, read that book.
Okay. Yes, I second that. Again, if you've been following me, I love Brene Brown. All her books. Gifts of Imperfection changed my life. I mean, that was my foray into personal, professional development at a deep level. And yes, anything by Brene Brown, I recommend her stuff all.
Her podcast, great. Like, listen to her podcast if you want to go that direction.
Yes, her podcast has been amazing. She has amazing guests on, and she's very thoughtful about her interviews. It's not just an interview asking questions. I mean, she really digs in with her guests. And I actually in the middle of listening to her episode with Simon Sinek, and it's amazing. So
he's great. By the way, yeah, check out Simon Sinek's stuff. I mean, you've heard me reference why a lot. I mean, I think fundamentally I believe it with or without Simon, but he really put great context into this idea of moving from why, which is kind of purpose, right? Like, what is your purpose? I mean, the why is kind of from this business perspective, what's your why, but like, what's your purpose? What's your why? What are you doing here? So he's great too. Watch his TED Talk, if anything.
Yes. Oh, so good. So good. Okay. So my last big question for you, this is really around some of the work that I do. One of my big tenets is this idea of controlling your career.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of our conversation has really led us to that. You're finding your purpose, you're finding your why, you're getting whatever skills you need, you're making decisions to move through. That is really controlling your career. It's not about, oh, where am I going to be in 20 or 30 years? It's about, what am I doing now to take control of the season of life that I'm in right now?
Yeah.
So for you, tell me about a time when you feel like you really took control of your career.
Yeah, I love it. And I think this story is so good because it ties together, I think, a lot of what we've spoken about today. And what came up for me around this was, so I had kind of, I wanted to be in San Francisco, and I moved out, and I at one point realized I wanted to be in tech. So I figured my way into tech, and I got my grad degree, and I wanted to be in, doing this sort of work around culture. I finally found my way to a company that had tools around organizational culture and engagement. And then they got acquired, and it got a little strange. And a friend of mine went to LinkedIn, and when she was at LinkedIn, she connected me to somebody she knew there who was looking to hire somebody for a 1-year contract on this team. They were evaluating this tool. And it was kind of, in San Francisco and all the big fancy companies, LinkedIn had built this brand new building. It felt like the pinnacle, like LinkedIn, finally, the credibility in this big company. But I was a contractor. And I think in my mind, I was going to go there and take this role, and then I was going to find a way to stay. And while I was there, it was really great experience. And I'd gotten clear on my purpose. I think I could articulate that. I could articulate kind of what I wanted to be doing in the world. And I started arranging interviews. And at LinkedIn, if you're inside, it's very easy to network. And I'd see open jobs, and I'd meet with hiring managers. And, about 3 months out, I started interviewing, and like, I was sharing these things I think I could have done these jobs, but I was also clear on what I wanted to be doing. I wanted to be a thought leader and a speaker, and I wanted to, these things that I've been thinking about. I wanted to do more on LinkedIn, and um, I was losing jobs. I wasn't getting them, and I would hear things like, "Look, we really like you, but we have a line of people that want to be salespeople, and you want to be in learning and development." And there were no learning and development roles. I mean, those are slim pickings, and people weren't leaving those roles. And the clock was ticking, and it was ticking, and honestly, it started to get a little, there I was again, like, oh, great. Like in that job hunt anxiety and how am I going to support my family? And I would have these interviews and I would share, I was very clear about my purpose and what was going on. And I'd come home and I'd tell my wife and she'd say, why did you share that? Like, why did you say that? And it was the first time in my life I was like, I don't know. I think I just had to. Like, it was this deeper piece. However, what I want to share is that about a month before the contract ran out, somebody said, there's this company, CultureAmp. You should talk to them. They're doing really cool stuff. They just got here from Australia and they're growing, and it's right up your alley, as you can imagine that you know me now. So I reached out and I got a connection, and I started saying the same things, and they were like, yeah, we want that. We love that. And can you come do this job and we'll support you you want to be a thought leader. We'll send you to conferences. I was being able to opportunity to speak and do those things. And I just always think back to, it was so scary and anxiety producing. I could have caved and twisted myself into a pretzel to get the job to save the day. And then I never would have gotten to that interview. And I just want to encourage people, like, get clear and trust. You're probably safer than you think you are. Most of us are in a position that, we have more abundance than we realize. We're safe. No one's going to let us starve or be without a roof over our head. And can you find the courage to just lean into your truth, to the work you want to do, which means you probably have to go through a period where it's going to be scary and there's going to be transition until you move into it. But that felt to me like a time where I took control, but I was reiterating, it was scary. It was nerve wracking. And I'm so, gosh, if I would have caved, I just think about all the things that have happened in my life since I made that transition, that may not have happened. So yeah. So I think that just really summarizes this, and about getting clear and being confident to move from that place. Because I promise you, if you're making $30,000 less a year doing the thing that you love the most versus $30,000 a year in an organization, a culture that doesn't fill your soul, you're going to be a much happier human in the long run. And I want that for everybody.
Absolutely. Oh, what a great story. What a great story. Okay, I have to hit on something too.
Yeah.
You were clear, you knew the purpose, you knew where you were heading, and you were sharing it with people, whether that was in an interview or people that you were communicating with. I think being able to confidently speak about what we're passionate about and what we want in our career, whatever that is, it could be a bigger generalized idea, or it could be a specific role that you want at a specific company. But when you can really start to articulate that and share it out confidently, that's when you also trigger other people to go, oh, I know this, even, you and I, we talked before this interview, and immediately I was like, oh, I need to connect you with my friend who works at Zillow, because I think you guys do basically the same thing at different companies, and just that idea, that's what this is about.
Yes.
That is what controlling your career is about. That is what career strategy is about. Get clear on where you're headed in some fashion, but then be able to talk about it and not be afraid to talk about it.
And also, like, give yourself grace in the journey. Like, it's easy. I'm sitting here saying all this. I know it sounds so fluid. I came up with that in my own work. I came up with my purpose probably 2 years before I'd even say it to any. I was ashamed. I didn't like it. I thought it wasn't noble enough, the workplace, whatever. I mean, now I've had my own journey, and I realized that I think via the workplace, we really can influence people's lives and happiness. However, I just want to reiterate, like, there was a journey, and just please embrace the journey, and just like, where are you on that journey, and be where you are. It's like somebody said once, no rush, no pause. Like, just don't stop. And don't stop, but also don't beat yourself up. You don't need to be anywhere other than where you are today and move from that place. And believe me, if you met me 20 years ago, 15 years ago, like, the struggles, the bad jobs, the bad bosses, or I was probably not the best employee in the world either. So, it's easy to sit here now and share all this, and I love doing it. But I also don't want it to come across like, oh, it's just so easy. Like, there's work to be done, and there's a lot of personal work to be done. But if you do it, like, the life you're going to lead, I judge, will be way, way more fulfilling. And it doesn't matter what your title is or how much money I mean, like I was bestowed with this title. It's great. It's neat. Like, but I'm not a scientist. Like, I'm not a scientist. It's not, it never came up. I didn't study science, but I think it's a cool title and it's neat, but it's not me. If I'm not in this job, I'm still doing my work in the world. I don't need a title to do it. So,
Right. Right. Oh, Craig, thank you so much for
uh,
sharing your journey and all this wisdom with my audience. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. This has been absolutely
thank
wonderful.
you. And thank you for asking me. Like I said, I do speak a lot about other things and some of this I hit on, but it was really nice to just talk about this because beyond, yes, I've created a neat career in culture, but maybe other people, other passions. I want there to be the sub story of for others to say, get clear on what you want, make that happen. It can be different things. Not everybody wants to be talking on LinkedIn like that's fine. Like, do you want to be writing? Do you want to be a therapist in a small room with one-on-one really impacting lives? But whatever it is, I want people to do it, be happy, and stop. When we're unhappy, we push that off into others. We don't have enough for others, and we create more unhappiness. So.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. You mentioned earlier people can connect with you on LinkedIn, which I will also put in the blog post so they can get to that. Any other information or anything you want to share about where you can be found?
I would just share, like you said, CultureAmp if you're interested in tools, and I can always answer questions. Culture First if you're interested in the community that we're building and you want to get engaged. We're running events. They're amazing, human-focused events. They're virtual right now, so you can get, they're all listed there at that channel. Me, Culture Craig, LinkedIn, but also Instagram and Twitter. And finally, I've been doing a lot more in Clubhouse. So not everybody can be in Clubhouse right now, but if you can. We started the Culture First Club. Come follow that. We're just all kinds of workplace topics. But I'm in there as well and hosting conversations. And I'm sure I'll be talking about, workplace stuff and job and employment stuff as well. So those are the places.
Yes. And I've actually heard Craig speak on Clubhouse. I've been in a couple of his rooms and it goes deep. Let me tell you, it is really good. So definitely if you're on that and you're interested, that is a really great space to show up and
I'll
hear.
say you're right. Now you said that we've been running these contagious vulnerability rooms on Fridays and Mondays, and they're designed for people to really show up and just be vulnerable in a space. Like I talked about that space to practice. Fridays are just open. So again, you can show up there. And if you want to talk about work, that's great. But Mondays, we've designed that to be contagious vulnerability workplace edition. And I'm sharing that with your audience because that's, maybe you're struggling in your job and having a hard time moving or having that conversation with your manager or negotiating. And we're creating space for people to show up and be honest about the real struggles and supportive. And the people that are showing up and giving feedback to each other, it's kind of out of control. So that's, if you want a space, I mentioned earlier, to show up and just be seen, like that's a good start. Monday at 11 Pacific time, Contagious Vulnerability Workplace Edition. And if you follow, just follow me. That's a Contagious Vulnerability Club, but you'll see it, and we'd love to have you.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing what people share, and it makes you feel like you're not alone if you happen to be in a similar situation. So yeah, highly recommend. Craig,
because guess what? You're not alone. I promise you.
no.
Your story might be different, but at the end of the day, it's fear, sadness, joy. Like we're all feeling these feels. You're not alone.
Yep.
And when you see that, it really helps take the weight off a bit.
Yes, absolutely. Craig, thank you again. I'm so excited for this interview, for people to hear it. Thank you.
Thank you.